Ladies and gentlemen, you can undoubtedly say worldwide one man above all others stands for the individual and anti-forced collectivism, and that is former Congressman, medical doctor, Air Force veteran, Dr. Ron Paul. And he joins us for the next 20 minutes or so to cover the waterfront. I intended to ask him about Syria and the victory we've had. That was my first question, the victory we've had in backing off an expansion of war and the Russians threatening nuclear war over it. And I said, sir, what would you like to cover first? And he said, Syria. So we're on the same page. Then we're going to get into the attack on the real Tea Party that he helped found a decade ago. His movement grew into the proto-Tea Party about 8 years ago in his first run for president. Well, it was his second run, but, the first modern run. And he joins us now. RonPaulChannel.com has a lot of amazing guests. Very excited to tell folks about that. More Liberty Media to displace the dying dinosaur media. We're going to talk about the future of the controlled media, the attack on the internet as well. We're going to cover the waterfront. But first, sir, you said you want to talk about Syria. So please give us, Dr. Paul, your take on that.
Well, I hope it's good news. So far, so good. The people spoke out because they've been listening to programs like yours and a lot of other ones. And the people spoke out when the president decided that he would come to the Congress and get permission to start bombing Syria. And the American people evidently said, we've had enough wars, we don't want it, and we're not going to let our congressman vote for it. So he knew he couldn't win the vote, so he backed off. So they had to back off on the bombing. So I think this is a victory. Does this mean that he has changed his tune? Probably not. He's still very much involved. He's put out an open hand, to the Iranians. I think that is good. So although I am not certain about where he's coming from finally, when there's a chance to at least say, well, he's doing the right thing, we shouldn't say, well, we don't want him to do that. I want, a different type of foreign policy. And so far, I think we're seeing it. But, today there was something in the news I thought was important. It's related to this. And that is the American government now has said, we're going to cut off non-lethal help and aid to the Syrian rebels. Lo and behold, can you imagine how long this has been going on? A long time before we even knew about our involvement. The CIA's been involved there a long time. But to cut off non-lethal aid isn't good. But why did we send it in the first place? And does that mean they're still going to send lethal aid? And he assures us that they're going to continue to send humanitarian aid, which is nothing more than a weapon for these factions. So he's moving in the right direction, but we need to move a lot faster, because my position has been that we just shouldn't be involved at all. And this whole pretense that we're helping the good guys over there, and yet the weapons end up in the hands of the Al-Qaeda, at least they're recognizing that. Not only did he back off on the bombing, he's recognizing that, yes, some of us who said don't send the weapons, it'll end up in the hands of the enemy. He's recognizing this, and the president has backed off on sending some of this equipment, but that's put to keep the pressure on him to back off on sending anything to an area like this, because it cannot be of any benefit to us whatsoever.
Well, it's very exciting, Dr. Paul, and I want to get your take on this because it ties into the media, that they said we've got to go to war. It's going to happen. They launched the sarin gas attack, a.k.a. the Syrian government, Assad. And then now Sy Hersh has come out with documents that it was really the Syrian opposition that did it, backed by the West. Of course, we broke that first with WorldNet Daily and others. Drudge Report carried our articles. And, of course, we got attacked for it. Your son got attacked valiantly in the Senate for daring to point out that we were funding al-Qaeda. But overnight now it's admitted, and suddenly we don't ever hear about Syria in the news anymore. From imminent, we've got to have war, to let's not talk about it, and we've stopped this criminal escalation. To me, and we're seeing this now on so many fronts, Obamacare, you name it, their wave has been stopped politically. And I've seen this historically, where everything they wanted they got just by weight of inertia. Now it looks like we've stopped them and are beginning to turn the tide. Do you concur, or do you add anything to your deep historical perspective?
Well, I concur, and I'm excited about it, and I'm very pleased, and I praise the direction that we're going, and I give the credit to a lot of people who put pressure on their members of Congress, because that's the way the system actually works. I know that a lot of people get frustrated. Oh, one person can't do any good. My member of Congress never listens. But when enough people send a message, they will listen because they're political animals. So I see this as being very, very positive, but I'm not convinced that even though the Pew poll showed that now we have 54% of the American people for the first time in 40 years saying that we should be not involved in this kind of activity, I'm not convinced that the American people are quite with us, but they're so much better than they were. Some of them are just saying, well, we're running out of money, let's spend all this money on welfare here at home. But, the first step of just stopping this overseas is a big help, and therefore I'm cautiously optimistic, and everybody knows that I spend a lot of time on college campuses, and believe me, reaching young people is important, and the young people do not want to have another war to inherit. They have enough problems and enough, things that they have to face that they've been given, by a previous generation, including the debt and the mess in medical care and all this military intervention. So one thing for sure, the message I hear in college campuses, we don't need another war. That's good.
Again, libertarian, patriot, constitutionalist icon Ron Paul joins us. The website, of course, is excellent. The shows are amazing. I'm a big fan of ronpaulchannel.com, and it is supplanting the mainstream media and all over talk radio now. I do affiliate interviews every other day, and so many times when I'm on a local station, I was on one in Knoxville just yesterday and heard during the news break them play your 2-minute analysis. It's just excellent and hard-hitting and absolutely pertinent to what's happening. Now, looking at targeting young people, we're targeting to take the blinders off. Obama's targeting them with the Obamacare to dumb them down, which I believe was designed to fail, and they now admit that, to bankrupt the old system and bring in single payer. Now Colin Powell's getting behind that. Boehner, John Boehner, or whatever his name is, the Speaker of the House, is coming out saying it's ridiculous that Tea Party Republicans in the House and Senate, led by Ted Cruz and your son, Senator Rand Paul, would not want to have a bigger budget when they boost it $60 billion, cut it $20 billion, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Dr. Paul, I see the Republican and Democratic leadership with Karl Rove and others really trying to destroy a true libertarian movement in the Republican Party that you've helped forge with the groups that you set up, the Campaign for Liberty and others. We're trying to save this country. What do we do to get on the offense to once and for all remove these rhino statists out of the Republican Party, because they admit they're scared that we could take over?
Well, I think we're making progress because the alignment has changed. When these budget agreements come up, it's leadership of both parties that get together. But the grassroots, on both sides frequently get together. That's what happened on the bombing. The leadership, Republican and Democrats, wanted to give permission to the president to bomb Syria, but the people went out and reached the individual congressman. That's exactly what happened when we, got our audit the Fed bill passed on 2 occasions in the House, and it wasn't because I had any, legislative clout. In that sense, I didn't have any ability to put leverage on anybody. But we had every Republican vote for it, and we had a lot more Democrats vote for it, too. But this comes from a coalition of the people. So I think the most important thing is changing people's attitudes, and hopefully issues like war, issues of NSA spying, issues of the Fed, they transcend some of this party stuff. And I love the issues where you can reach both elements, where we can come together and change policy. But then there's this power struggle that is so disruptive to the whole system in Washington. Even though they do compromise on the big issue, there's a big fight on who gets to pull the strings and write the checks.
Well, I agree with you. I would be a Democrat if they had Ron Pauls and Rand Pauls and Ted Cruz in it, and I would love to take over the Democratic Party with American free market ideas. Separately, as you know, they're scapegoating capitalism for the problems we're in when it's purely crony capitalism. How do you see us winning that fight, Dr. Paul, for the hearts and minds, as things collapse into collectivism that you've always predicted. You have said many times that the crisis is they'll offer more collectivism as the answer. How do we reverse this QE unlimited, what's happening with the economy? How do we explain to people that it's insider groups doing this, not the free market?
Well, there's no easy way. We have to keep plugging away, and that is getting information out there, which that's your business, and that's been my goal. And if you change the prevailing attitudes of the people, you will change the attitudes of people in Congress. But it's been helpful. There's been a couple things going on here in these last 5 years, and I especially noticed it during the presidential campaigns that I was involved in, and that is communications are different now. Your communications are not average. You're not Fox News. You know, you communicate with a lot of people, but it's differently. So we have the internet. We have radio programming that's independent. So that vehicle is available to us like never before. But also, the evident failure of the system is so clear. So we look at it and say, yeah, the foreign policy of the Middle East is a disaster. Let's slow it down. So this information has gotten out, and we can use that to our benefit. So I think it's going to be the failure of the system. I think the question that you might be raising here is, yes, we know it isn't working, and we know things are going to come down, but what will the results be? And that's still up for grabs, although we can look at some areas that are very positive, we can be optimistic, but that is the bottom line. You know, who gets blamed? Will it be capitalism in the good sense, or will it be crony capitalism that gets the blame? You know, we have these, Wall Street, demonstrators, but they're always complaining, but it should be shown that they're against crony capitalism, not free capitalism. It's an educational effort, and I think the opportunity is there, the opportunity to spread the message. At the same time, the failure of the system is going to play into our hands because there has to be a need, there has to be a replacement, because if we allow a vacuum to, come with the failure of the economic system, believe me, we're going to end up with a worse situation. Then we will have dictatorship, and that's why, empires and dictatorship depends on lies. And just look at the lies that we've had to put up with in the last several decades. They get worse and worse. At the same time, we have more whistleblowers than ever before.
That's right.
So that to me is a good trend.
We've only got about 4 minutes left with you, and I appreciate your time. Let me throw this out at you then, since you mentioned dictators. That reminds me, they're finally having congressional hearings, as I'm sure you know as a news hound, with Jonathan Turley on the left and Cato Institute, people on the right, saying Obama pretty much has become a dictator. Doesn't mean he's physically a dictator who'll stay in office, but they're making the office dictatorial on immigration, on Obamacare, which they created, across the board, on power plants. What do we do about repudiating Obama? Because if we just let him sail off into the sunset and don't impeach him or don't repudiate it, it sets that precedent that you just mentioned. What do we do about dictatorship? And then separately, give me your take on Obamacare.
Well, Obamacare, I mean, we can dismiss that rather easily as a total disaster, and the medical care that you will get is no better than the computers that he has been working with. But, the dictatorship is a very real thing, but I don't see it as limited to Obama, because when you look at what's happened and what has happened, with the attack on civil liberties, the spying and the covert war, there is Republican and Democrat. What about the National Defense Authorization Act? That was under, another administration. And we have this idea of assassinations. This too often is bipartisan. Yes, if you want to tag it on and show what's happening with Obama, that is fine. But I think we're going to accept the dictatorship that is elected, because people say, well, no, he's going to announce for a third term and he's going to be a dictator. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the American people would shake the American people finally, and I think it would serve our interest. But that doesn't mean that we will have a less dictatorial government.
Oh, I totally agree. So we now have exactly. So we now have a kind of a dictatorial bureaucracy and a system that has just set the precedent to get away with whatever they want. So let me ask you this. How do we reverse that, briefly? Give me your take on where you think Obamacare is going now. Then I have one more question for you, Dr. Paul.
Okay. Well, I think Obamacare probably is going to limp into existence, and that the election next year will show that it wasn't very popular, and they'll probably back off a little bit. But even if Republicans have more control next year, they're not going to get rid of the whole thing, and they're not going to take a principled stand of questioning why should the government be involved at all. So as bad as it is now and as bad as Obama is trying to make it, I think that not a whole lot is going to happen for the long-term future until after the next election. And then I think hopefully they'll at least allow individuals to opt out of the system and then say, all I want is to be able to take care of myself. A big request in a free society. So I think that it doesn't look good on the long run, but at least maybe it'll get improved a little bit after next year's election.
Sure, or Rand Paul's bill to make Congress, the House and Senate, live under the same laws they passed for us. I mean, for me, that's major discrimination that they're exempt. I know you pushed against that. And speaking of that, here are the two final points that go together. Former Reagan advisor David Stockham, a top economist, told Bloomberg earlier in the week that every market valuation has lost every anchor to the real world. That sounds like Ron Paul talking. A lot of economists say the big event has to happen by the middle of next year with all this QE unlimited, with the bubble bursting. What do you think is happening in the real economy with all this fiat? And then what's the word on your son running for president?
Well, you know, I think in the real world, the economy is a lot worse than people, think. Of course, the people who are suffering, they know darn well. And that's the bottom 1/3, at least, because, if you look at the workforce, only 61% of the workforce are employed. So more than a third of the people are essentially unemployed or having a terrible time. And yet, stock markets go up, and you look at Wall Street, and there's more wealth than before in certain groups. So it's a bipolar world. It's the very rich and the very poor, and that is going to continue, and it's a predictable event by Austrian economics that this would happen and middle class would be destroyed. But that's going to lead to, a lot of political problems as well. Economic problems lead to political problems. The whole thing, well, who's going to get blamed for it? Will freedom and the free markets be blamed, or will it be too much government? Will it be Obama-type Obamacare and big government and big government spying? Are they going to get the blame? And that's still our job, and we have a lot of work to do.
Now, obviously, you're going to let him answer this, but, I mean, undoubtedly, if we show support, I think your son's hands down the best candidate. I'd like to see a Rand Paul run for president and a Ted Cruz run for vice president, or I guess you couldn't have a father-son team up, you for president, Rand for vice president. But certainly, I mean, as a father, you can't speak for your son, but as a father, could you ever have imagined that your son could end up being not just president, but end up being a libertarian president to restore the republic?
Well, it takes some adjustment to think about it, but, he's in a position now, I was toiling in the field for a lot of years and a lot of decades and made some progress. But I think he's in a much better position now. Being in the Senate makes a difference. I think the freedom movement is much further along. I think the failure of our economic and foreign policy system is in shambles. So I think he's in a much better position now to play an instrumental role, in whatever he does, whether it's in the Senate or how well he does in the presidential election. And most people are assuming that's probably, what he'll do. I'm sure he hasn't made a final decision, even though he hasn't discouraged the discussion about whether or not he might run.
Well, he has just really made us all proud, and I'm so glad I backed him. He's turned out even better than I imagined. It's hard to be a total clone off the old block, but I tell you, he really is a statesman. And God bless you, Dr. Paul. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Very good. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care. Wow, there goes former Congressman Ron Paul, and that is very exciting. And I'll be on his TV radio show on Monday for folks that want to tune into that, and that's at the ronpaulchannel.com.